There's still one waiting room.
Kelly. Can you see it?
Right. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all see us. We did a similar webinar yesterday, and we had one or two technical difficulties, but I hope you can all see and hear us well. Thank you very much indeed for coming and to this webinar on the Renters' Rights Bill. For those of you who haven't met us, I'm Nick Pearce. I'm the Managing Director of Circa London, and to my right is Robby Ellis, who is the Associate Director and Head of the Lettings Department, most importantly. We've also got attending remotely Kate Grassick-Whitby, who is our sort of compliance and our expert on various aspects of this bill. And if you post any questions in the chat, which we encourage you to do, Kate will answer them to the best of her ability, or raise them with Robby or I, and we'll try and get to the answers to you in due course. So I think we've got everybody who we're expecting. So without further ado, we'll crack on. So the Renters' Rights Bill is coming down the tracks, and the first question to you, Robert, is what is the Renters' Rights Bill?
Well, thank you, Nick. As you'll all know, there's been a lot of talk about the housing crisis for quite a while now. Successive governments have been discussing these changes to the laws. There are 11 million people in rented accommodation at the moment. Not all of it to the right sort of standard and quality it needs to be. So the Renters' Rights Act is new legislation aimed at enhancing and the protection of tenants, basically, by implementing several sort of key reforms. As I mentioned, it's been in existence and in talks for some time. Various governments have been discussing it, but it's being pushed through now by Labour, and we're expecting it to come through later this year. In essence, it's going to quite fundamentally change the structure and sort of structure of tenancies and the way that notice can be served, with a view mainly to giving tenants more security and more rights. So yeah, that in essence is the crux of the new law. Now, later this year it's coming in, Nick, I believe.
Yeah, we think so. There are obviously, when any bill comes to Parliament, as I'm sure you all know, there is a due process it has to go through, and has to go through the Commons, which the lower house, and then the Lords, and then it goes to the committee stage, and then finally, once it's through all that, it goes to the King, who signs it off, gets royal assent, and it becomes law. So at the moment, we're at the stage where it's been through the Commons. They've had 3 readings of the Commons, various amendments and been made during those readings. And it's now had 2 readings in the Lords. Again, further amendments have been made, and it's now at the committee stage. The committee stage is basically where it's gone through line by line, so that they're absolutely certain it's watertight and does what it's supposed to do, etc. And then it goes to the royal assent. Our best guess, and for those, the best guess of people more informed than Robby and I, is that it will get to the royal assent by Easter. Easter being at the end of April this year, quite late. And the government have promised us that they're not just going to suddenly land this legislation on our desks and we have to abide by it the next day. They are going to give us time to implement it, not least, I imagine, to get so that they get their act together as well. And so our best guess in terms of when the implementation comes is the 1st of October of this year. So we've got time, and as we'll come on to saying further down the line, we are prepared. We're prepared as far as we can be for the moment. Yeah, as I say, best guess 1st of October. So, Robert, what's changing?
Well, quite a lot of things are going to fundamentally change. The main one being is the structure of all tenancies or what are now ASTs. So most of you will be familiar with fixed term contracts, so contract of 12 months onwards. Now, all assured short-hold tenancies, which covers 95% of the tenancies we do, are going to become assured periodic, which essentially means that they will be rolling from the start. So there'll be no fixed terms. A tenancy will begin and will roll on a month-to-month basis thereafter. Now, under the current system, a tenant has 6 months security. They can be within the property for 6 months without being asked to leave. This will extend to 12 months, so a landlord will not be able to ask the tenant to leave and to regain the possession for at least a year. However, the tenant will have the right to serve 2 months' notice effectively at any point. So in the worst case, a tenant could move into a property, perhaps it's not up to the standard they were expecting, and then serve notice immediately to leave 2 months later. So again, the structure is the thing that is most significant here. There are also some more clauses and changes, particularly to the notices. Now, I mentioned 95% of the tenancies will go into the new system. Non-Housing Act tenancies, so holiday lets, company lets, and common law tenancies, which are tenancies with rents over £100,000 per year, they will not be affected by this.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say at this point, before we go into more detail, things are carrying on as normal for the moment. So we're arranging tenancies on a daily basis, and the normal assured short-hold tenancy agreements are applicable. As Robby said, you could serve notice on the tenants can't serve notice for 6 months, etc. And let's be honest, tenants aren't suddenly going to decide that what they really want to do is move house every 2 months. Nobody wants to move house unless they have to. So we're not suddenly going to get a raft of people handing in notice every 2 months.
That's right.
And in fact, Robby, I think I'm right saying that in Scotland, this sort of legislation is already in place, and the effects have been.
That's right, and actually we take quite a lot of encouragement from that. This a similar law came in a few years ago, and which gave tenants rights to up and leave, but actually average tenancy length since it's come in has been 22 months. Being where we are in central London, we have lots of people moving about, but the last few years our average tenancy length has been 17 months, which is pretty long in comparison to the industry standards. So we're actually quite encouraged that the tenants having this extra security is not going to make them want to up and leave more quickly or more readily. If they've got a good property, I think it will make them feel more comfortable, and they may well end up staying in fact longer term.
I think the average of our current tenancies has been, I think, for a number of years now, quite high, hasn't it? It's not
17 months is our average over the last few years. Yeah. So we're encouraged. We don't think that whilst people will have the freedom to up and leave, as Nick says, it's not going to get any cheaper, any less stressful. We're not concerned that it's going to have a significant impact. Certainly not on the sort of high caliber of properties that we deal with.
Okay. I mean, I think probably one of the questions that a lot of landlords and anybody remotely interested in property have been asking is about this. How am I going to regain possession of my property?
That's correct. So the abolition of Section 21, or the no fault eviction, is one of the key principles of this new act. No fault evictions is the key thing. Generally speaking, if a tenant isn't at fault, we've got no reason to ask them to leave. So the tenancy will roll, the tenants will pay the rent. If, of course, there are any problems, they fall into rent arrears or they're acting in an antisocial way, like in the current system, you don't have to wait for notice periods. There are, the sort of mechanisms in place to be able to regain possession and get them back. But assuming the tenant behaves themselves, they do have the right to be in a property for 12 months. But if you do need to get your property back for, reasons such as you want to sell the property, you'll need to move back in, or you've got family members who move back into want to move into the property, then you have those options to do so. The structure will again change as it is at the moment. Tenant has a right to 6 months. You would serve 2 months notice after 4 months for them to leave. Under the new system, it would be like an 8 + 4 month notice. So on the 8th month, you would serve 4 months notice to the tenants to regain possession after 1 year. So whilst it will offer more security for tenants and make them feel more protected, but of course it's not going to stop you as a landlord being able to make changes and sell, move in, do all those things as and when you need. There are some other measures sort of concerning the properties and the tenancy themselves which you have some colour on.
Yes, I mean there are probably one of the more important ones is that at the moment, as many of you will be aware of, we let to students who are coming from overseas and therefore can't be referenced, or people coming from can't be referenced for one reason or another. We can ask them to pay rent in advance. With the students, generally, we ask them to pay 6 months rent in advance, and then we ask them to pay a further 6 months, 4 months after that. When this becomes law, unless there are any amendments to the contrary, which, to be honest, we don't anticipate, you'll only be allowed to ask for 1 month's rent in advance. Actually, I should say you'll only be able to accept 1 month's rent in advance, because there probably will be students who go, well, I don't mind about this. I'd like to pay you 6 months in advance. We're not going to be allowed to accept that. We will come on in a further slide to let you know how we're going to cope with that, and we've got insurance policies, etc., in place so that it's not as scary as it might sound. But that's going to be the new law. Secondly, interestingly, all tenants are going to be allowed to request a pet. They can ask for a pet now, of course, but you can just say no, don't want you to have a pet. The change is that you are not reasonably going to be able to refuse them permission to have a pet. What is reasonable and what is unreasonable will always be sort of open to debate, but basically if your lease or the building prohibits pets, then obviously that's fair enough. You just turn around to them and say, I'm sorry, you're not allowed pets in the building. But if you just don't want to have a pet because you don't like the idea, I'm afraid that's not reasonable any longer. However, what you can do is say, we want you to take out insurance. You, the tenant, take out insurance to cover any damages that a pet might cause, and we want to see evidence of that. And also the law provides for, in the unlikely event that the insurance doesn't cover all the damage that the pet might do, the law provides for you to being able to pursue the tenants through the courts for any surplus. So again, we will come to it, but we've got you covered in terms of insurance. And again, the tenants will pay for that insurance. It's not, despite there being tenants fee bans, etc. That's not going to come. Further new measures, Robert?
There are measures which are going to be concerning you as landlords and also your properties. Now, so that the government can monitor and keep track of all tenancies, you will have to register your properties onto a nationwide database, as well as yourselves as individuals. Now, with that means if you've got more than one owner, irrespective of whether you're taking an active role in it or you simply own a small share, you will have to be registered. Now, without doing so, we as an agent are unable to let your property. We're not even able to market the property. So it is entirely necessary for people to do this. The process has not yet been confirmed, but we understand that we'll be able to do a lot of that for you. There will be some small sort of financial implication of doing the registering, which again is not yet confirmed, but we will update everybody in due course. Very important to note that the government are very serious about this, and they will be policing it, and they're imposing pretty punitive fines to anybody who tries to cut corners. For any properties or landlords who aren't registered, there will be an immediate fine of £7,000, and that's £7,000 per landlord. So, if there's some of our landlords are one of a group of four, if a property is registered and all four of those landlords aren't, then that could be £28,000 for the family, straight away. Repeat offences will increase up to a maximum of £40,000. So this is something that we won't be able to avoid. yeah, we'll be able to assist in, but it is a sort of essential and mandatory thing.
Yeah. Yes, quite scary. So we've got to behave.
Needless to say, we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to prepare for this and make sure that we're ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I say, it's still in the committee stage, so it could still be subject to various amendments. There are various organisations lobbying heavily for certain amendments. There's been quite a lot of concern over this business of the tenants not being able to pay more than a month's rent in advance. But to be honest with you, I don't think any really significant amendments are going to come down the tracks between now and it becoming law. But we're keeping up to date with any changes. We're regularly attending webinars that are organised by ARLA, the Association of Residential Letting Agents, who are our sort of governing body, HMRC, and various other bodies. And we're most importantly, we're looking at our procedures and our systems to ensure that we can make sure that you're compliant with all of these new requirements. As managing agents and letting agents, it's obviously vital that we're bang up to date and make sure everybody complies. The good news from our point of view is that as a potential landlord, this day and age, without retaining a professional such as ourselves, it's a minefield. So you need us, I'm afraid. So we'll continue to keep you updated and advise as the changes come through. Once it becomes law, which, as I say, we expect the royal assent to be through by Easter, then we'll hold another webinar. You'll be pleased to hear probably rather more brief than this one. Confirm the new measures. So we've asked for questions, and we have had some that have came in advance. And Robby, if I may, I shall read one or two to you and put you on the spot.
Of course.
So as we mentioned about the rent up front, etc., somebody has said, should I only rent my property to professionals going forward?
Well, no, is the answer to that. There are systems in place to be able to allow you to let your property to those who aren't able to be referenced as students and those who don't meet affordability criteria without problems. We have been working behind the scenes, and we've just signed a partnership agreement with a rent guarantor company. Now, the way this will work, if we have a student, for example, they're not able to pass the affordability, so they will sign an agreement with this guarantor company. There will be a fee, which will be the tenants to pay, not the landlords, which we understand to be approximately 3 weeks' rent per annum. And that company will then guarantee the rent for the tenant. They will sign our contract as a guarantor. So essentially, you have the same security. It's like an insurance premium and insurance policy, effectively guaranteeing things. We sometimes see sort of deed of guarantees and similar things in corporate tenancies as well, which work no problem. So in answer to your question, no, Nick, you can let to professionals, you can let to students. Students generally pay higher rents, although maybe stay slightly shorter term. So, shorter, high reward, but not quite so much security. Professionals will tend to stay slightly longer term, maybe not pay quite so much. So I think things will work out to be pretty similar, just with that extra security.
So like any investment, really, the higher the risk, the greater the reward.
Absolutely.
And vice versa.
Absolutely right.
Another very pertinent question really is, which I'm sure is on the minds of everybody, is how do you anticipate the Renters' Rights Act affecting the lettings market as a whole over the next year or two?
Well, the obvious thing when it comes to students is that they will now have the right to leave, to break a contract and leave whenever they want. Mostly students will arrive in September and sign for a year, which may mean that they have a 2 or 3 month period over the summer when they're paying for property they're not using. Now, I would expect that quite a few of those people will exercise their right to leave the contract next in 2026, next May time when their course finishes, and that will mean a lot of properties coming back onto the market. Demand will drop, and then we'll probably see a bit of a drop in values, which is unusual for that time of year. Now, what will almost certainly happen is 3 months later in September, when their courses restart, these people who've left will flood back, and that will, cause a huge spike in demand, which is, already a very busy time. So I think there may be a very short-lived drop in demand and values, which will be followed by a very significant spike. We've seen a similar thing during COVID. Most people left London in 2020, 2021. They then returned in 2022 in enormous numbers, causing the rents to raise, to record levels. 21 to 22 saw an increase of 17% across London in terms of rental value. So there may be a little period of uncertainty and a short softening of the market, but I'm very confident that will be followed by quite a strong rise in values. I think another important thing is that some landlords who aren't intending to, who don't keep their property in good condition and are worried about tenants leaving, will probably be minded to sell, which means that there'll be fewer properties available for people to rent, which again will reduce the supply, which should drive up prices.
There's a question on the chat that came in from Kelly, and part of which I think Kate's answered, but also Kelly, I think you're saying could we pass on the cost of the registration for the property and for the landlords to the tenant? And I'm afraid that we can't do that, and we neither can we ask for a higher rent in order to copy for that. And I'll tell you why that's the case. The tenants will be able to question the level of rent at any stage after this act comes in. So if they feel that the rent has been increased or is unduly high, they will be able to have recourse to a tribunal who will adjudicate on that and will say yes, the rent is correct, or no, it's too high, and adjust the rent accordingly. So as we do already, we very thoroughly research the market. We tell our landlords, we recommend to you what the current rent is, and that figure we will ask, and that's the rent that we will achieve. If we ask for a higher rent than the market effectively level is, then the tenants can just turn around and go to the tribunal and say we're not happy with this rent, and the tribunal can overturn it. So no, I'm afraid the answer is you're not going to be able to pass it onto the tenants.
There is also an important thing to add here, that whilst you are in some ways being tied in slightly longer to these tenancies, you do still have the option to increase the rent once per year. But as Nick says, you need to be able to demonstrate that it is in line with market values. And again, if it's challenged, then you need to be able to prove that. We will always give our clients the right advice. And, it's even more important when these laws come in to try and get good quality tenants who are going to stay long term and keep your rent coming in consistently. That will become even more important. So we will always give you the right advice and strategy to help you achieve that.
So I'm just trying to look at another question here. What do you see the prospects of students being non-preferred tenants as they have a higher risk to leave at 9 months? I think we've kind of covered that already.
Yeah, I think the fact of the matter is that students pay more rent than professionals, which baffles some people. But of course, most students behind them have parents who are professionals and work hard and invest in their children's education. So I still anticipate that students will pay more premium rents, the fact that they can now leave early might be seen as an advantage, but you also have to take into consideration that they're also having to pay 3 weeks worth of 3 weeks rent each year as a fee just to be able to guarantee their rent. So there is, a cost implication there, which currently they don't have. So
I think also, Robbie, once they've done this business of leaving at the end of the first year and then coming back in September to find another property, they're going to be in competition with all the freshers coming for the first time, plus all the second years and third years looking somewhere else. And then I think they're very going to quickly realise that that's probably best avoided by just taking a longer term.
That's exactly right. And again, when a lot of the students came back in their droves in 2022 after a couple of years of sort of remote learning, and that's exactly what happened. Rents demand skyrocketed, so too did rents. People found it very, very difficult to find themselves properties. Many of them had to rent temporary accommodation or hotels, which cost them a lot of money, and were unsettled at the start of their course. So we saw the following year, 2023, which we feel was probably the record summer. Tenants didn't think twice about committing themselves long term, because having been once burnt by the problems of competing with increased numbers, they were shy and just wanted to get themselves something secured. So we feel it's going to, after perhaps a little bit of uncertainty at the beginning, be very strong and actually probably beneficial for our landlords.
I think it's important to say, as with any legislation, anything to do with the law, really, it's there as a structure for landlords or tenants to use at any time during the tenancy. But the most important and the most sensible and pragmatic way to deal with your tenants or with the landlords is to have a decent relationship with them. If you have a happy tenant who gets what they expected for the rent that they're paying, we as managing agents look after them, we communicate with them, you develop a relationship with them. You can do anything outside of this, you can do anything by agreement. As I say, you can't, unfortunately, take rent in advance from them, or more rent in advance from them. But you can talk to them as reasonable human beings. And as I say, nobody really wants to leave a property unless they have to for whatever circumstances. And people aren't just going to take a lease for a few months and then give in their notice, because it's just not. It's too much hassle, too expensive, and not worth their while doing. So, although on the face of it, some of this looks a bit scary, the reality is that things will pretty much continue as normal, provided you're totally compliant. And as I say, as your managing agents, that will be our job to make sure that you are. What are your view of the next half-year rental projections? Demands your
I'll answer that one. So rental values have been, after COVID, the highest they've ever been. We are seeing greater seasonal variations. So the rents in the summer have always been higher than the winter, but whereas that used to be 5%, maybe 10, this is in some cases 10, 15, even 20. So we are finding that students are able to pay more each year, and professionals, maybe feeling the pinch, are not able to pay quite so much. So the market is slightly softer now than it was this time last year, but still on balance, very, very good. A lot of people aren't necessarily aware of the changes that are coming up. I mean, we're letting you guys know sort of 8 months before we anticipate it being implemented. We are trying to keep calm and carry on. We are signing contracts with tenants. We're explaining these laws to them. But I don't envisage that this legislation is going to have a significant impact in the rents that we're able to achieve over the next 6 to 8 months. There will be changes in any case, which we're seeing, which we're seeing having sort of without that. But I don't expect it's going to have a significant impact between now and when it's implemented.
Any further questions there that we haven't answered? I think Kate's being very good and in the background quite replying to a lot of the questions, and I think
we did have one which was messaged in about renewals. So there is no fixed term tenancy. There's no renewal thereafter of a fixed term. All tenancies are simply rolling. So the concept or the idea of agreeing a renewal won't be there, because there'll be a different structure. But as I said, we do have the provision once per annum to increase the rent. So
In line with the market
in line
conditions.
with the market value. So that in effect will be where the sort of rent increase opportunity arises.
Thank you. I think we've pretty well got covered everybody's questions for the moment. Obviously, there is more detail to this act than we've been able to convey in this, but the most important measures we have covered. There are some fairly punitive fines for not being compliant with this legislation. If, for example, you decided you wanted to sell your property and the tenant, you served the tenant notice, they vacated, and you then put the property on the market, and 6 months later, for whatever reason, there wasn't a purchaser. You might say, well, I tell you what, I'll let it again and worry about it further down the line. The reality is you won't be able to do that for 12 months from the time that you've taken vacant possession of the property. So once you've said to your tenant, I'm going to sell it, if you relet it within that the 12 months period, then there are fairly punitive fines that can be imposed upon you. And it's actually not so much the fine that's important, but the previous tenant is apparently able to request a refund of rent that he's paid to you whilst he was in the property. So yeah, there's some fairly strict laws. But as I say, you can negotiate anything with the tenant. You don't have to serve them notice and say, get out and sell my property. You can say, look, I want to sell my property. Do you mind if I bring prospective purchasers around? And then when I find a buyer, I'll serve you with a 4 months notice, which gives you plenty of time to source alternative property, etc. So again, it's absolutely going to be even more important than before that we keep our tenants happy, we look after them, and the way to do that is to make sure that they know what they're getting from the start, and that we as your managing agents are responsive to any problems and any difficulties they have through the tenancy.
The most important thing is we have plenty of time. We're trying to give you an update and kind of a steer on what's going to happen nice and early, but we will be in touch with every single one of our landlords, with plenty of time before this comes in so that we can prepare you. We can discuss any necessary changes, also get a bit of an idea on what you're hoping to do with the property, be it sell it or, move back in or keep it rented. So we'll speak to everybody as an individual and come up with the right strategy based on your circumstances and what you're hoping to do. So there's really no need to worry. We've got plenty of time and we'll be able to make a plan.
Yeah, and the good news is that at the moment we're at the end of February. Sales market is showing a lot of activity, a lot of life. We've had the busiest January and February this year that we've had for a long time, and our sales pipeline is 200% above what it was this time last year. So there's activity in the marketplace. Interest rates, as you know, have come down. There are various schools of thought as to how quickly and whether they're going to continue to come down. I think it's quite likely that we'll see probably 3 further reductions during the course of this year, and I don't suspect each reduction will be greater than the 0.25 that the previous ones have been. But that means that your average mortgage will be coming down considerably below 4%, and that I think brings the affordability back into the marketplace that we've been lacking for quite a while. So I think we're going to see a greater turnover of properties, and there's a lot being in the press about landlords are exiting the market because of X, Y, and Z. The reality is landlords aren't exiting the market in their droves, but what is true is they are forming a smaller proportion overall of the buyers. So what that will in effect mean is that the supply of properties available to rent is not going to grow at the pace same pace as demand. So rents are probably going to be pretty solid, if not continue to grow in the coming months and years. But there is, as Robby said, it's a little bit softer at the moment, but that's an affordability factor. There's only so much anybody can spend of their income on rent. So we have to be realistic in our expectations as to where the market's going. I hope that's been useful. I think we've probably covered everything that we sensibly can do today. You're probably bored rigid by now anyway, listening to Robby and I, but I hope you found it useful. I hope it's been informative. We'll keep you up to date as changes come through. And as I say, once it does become law, then we'll confirm everything to you. Whether or not you'll like this, we're quite enthused by this webinar format, so we're going to do some more, and we'll keep you posted about when and the content of those in the coming weeks. So thank you very much indeed for listening to us both, and as I say, reach out to us. You're in touch with all sorts of people with any one of the people at Circa London. Please reach out to us, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you haven't been able to answer today or in the future. Thanks again.